questions? Is there any further discussion? Legislator Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had hoped we'd have a vigorous discussion about what an independent reform process would look like and what the disagreements might be, if there are any. I'm disappointed there aren't questions. I'm disappointed that it appears to be business as usual for this committee and for this body. I'll briefly describe the proposal for those who are watching in attendance and for my fellow committee members. This proposal would reform the Legislative Redistricting Commission in the county charter to create an independent, nonpartisan process by expanding the current commission to 8 members, comprised of appointments, 4 each from each side of the aisle, to have a truly bipartisan, equal representation, and a model similar to the one used by our Board of Elections. The members would be the Democratic and Republican members, commissioners of the Board of Elections, 2 members of public policy or voters' rights advocacy groups, and 2 members of minority rights groups, and 2 more retired judges, which was an amendment from the previous proposal, which had 4 retired judges. It was amended because of concerns about the ability to find 4 retired judges that might be willing to serve, and also because of the perhaps inherent partisanship of elected officials, those being judges. Aside from the judges, no current or former elected party officials, elected officials, or campaign consultants could be named to the commission. In addition, the new commission would require something that is not in place now, and that is a maximum 1% deviation in the population of every legislative district. This would avoid the issue where legislative commissions load up one district and reduce the number in another district in order to get around the one man, one vote requirement for equal representation. This is something that is done at the congressional level and is done to a larger extent, a larger percentage value at the state level. This proposal would also require that we respect village, small towns, city neighborhoods, and where possible, town boundaries, so that legislative district lines would adhere to those lines. This also was a point of another amendment where I believe this referral was improved to respond to feedback from the community and from my fellow legislators to clarify language surrounding large towns. We have several towns in our county that have more than 25,000 people, which is one county legislative district, and would therefore need to be divided. Whenever that happens, the goal would be to keep existing municipal boundaries of the town, neighborhoods, hamlets, villages, or any other historical division. As referred to in one of our speakers, this referral would keep intact the constitutional requirement that districts be compact and contiguous. It would require at least 2 public hearings of the commission, which is not currently a requirement. It would require 5 votes to pass a plan and also to elect a commissioner, or a chairman, and hold a quorum for meetings. It would still require legislative approval once the plan is submitted to us, but this body would then not be allowed to modify it, to instill the independence and prevent the injection of partisan politics as much as possible. The referral would also establish specific time frames, given that we have a very truncated time period in the local election year following a decennial census. And one other point that was also a new amendment, which I believe is very key. That is, this referral would prohibit the use of any voter registration data, such as party enrollment or voting history, for consideration by the commission. And I think this is paramount, given the fact that districts should be drawn based on census data, based on geographic divisions, historical communities, and municipalities, without regard to where people live of a certain party and where people vote and what their voting trends are. This is the fundamental problem with the current process that was just passed by this committee, and one that would be prohibited in a truly independent, nonpartisan process. This proposal enjoys overwhelming support. The issue of independent, nonpartisan redistricting is supported by 65% of New York residents. That, according to a Quinnipiac poll last year, and I believe it would be even higher now that the issue of redistricting is more in the forefront. As an example, this issue was named as one of the top 5 priorities for the incoming Cuomo-Duffy administration in a recent poll right before New Year's Day. In further proof, 141 of 212 state legislators signed the New York Uprising Pledge alluded to by one of our public input speakers, including chairmen of both major political parties in this community. Both happen to be Assemblyman Joe Morelli and Republican Bill Riley. Governor Cuomo has pledged to veto any state plan that is not the result of an independent process, truly highlighting its importance. The independent mayor of New York City recently issued a new report called No Labels, which highlights the need for an independent, nonpartisan redistricting process to help our democracy rise above the partisanship that holds it down. Locally, there's a coalition of groups that have supported this, including the League of Women Voters, Citizens for Better New York, Metro Justice, National Organization for Women, Center for Governmental Research, and others. Many have spoken here before this committee. That coalition has also handled a petition drive that has over 700 citizens who signed a petition in support of this effort, which is no small undertaking given the issues that come before this county. Despite all this, the Republican majority of this honorable body remains obstinate, again putting party above all else. Amazingly, the minority leader of this honorable body dismissed this proposal as whining before he even read it back in November. Yet still, there have been some legitimate concerns raised. This proposal, and I'd like to address a few of them, this proposal would still allow for voter referendum of any redistricting plan if the lines are contested, which is an important aspect of county and local legislative redistricting that does not exist at the state or federal level. And that's an important safeguard that will remain in place to make sure that any panel does not get hijacked or railroaded off in a direction that the community does not think is best. This proposal does not denote any specific advocacy groups. I find it troubling that some of the public comments from my colleagues raise questions about the validity or the motives of some of the groups who are good government policy advocacy groups in this community. Those groups are not named in this. It just simply states that each side of the aisle would be able to reach out to any group that qualifies to make appointments to this commission. The goal of this process is not to create evenly divided Democratic and Republican districts, which was also a comment that I heard that I thought was at least reasonable. The goal should be to draw districts without regard to party. I think we'd all agree that there's no way to make all of the districts in this county completely competitive on a year-to-year basis, given the enrollment disadvantages in different parts of the county. However, that should not be a consideration. If we remove party registration, enrollment, and voting history from considerations, we would have more accountable, more natural districts, which should be the goal to provide fair representation. I'll be the first to admit that no process is perfect. This proposal would not have a process that is completely devoid of human opinion or some degree of partisanship, or certainly the agenda of the appointees. However, we don't need to look any further than our own Board of Elections to show that a truly bipartisan model can be accomplished. Reapportionment should be viewed in the exact same manner as the administration of elections. It will be incomprehensible to any of us, and any American, to have the majority party of the government in control of elections. We should look at reapportionment the exact same way. I believe strongly there is no public good served by gerrymandering through the current commission process. All that we have is unchecked political manipulation and abuse. And any study of past county redistricting fights will make that abundantly clear. We need to remove the shenanigans and avoid the conflicts of interest that are inherent in having legislators draw their own line. An independent process that is nonpartisan as possible to redraw the lines is what we need. It should not include politicians of any stripe with a personal or political stake. It should not consider voter registration or the residency of incumbents or potential challengers. There is a place for political partisanship. It's in our electoral campaigns. It is not before those campaigns exist and begin by undermining voters' rights when drawing district lines. I'd like to just highlight one example that sort of brings to light what I would call the absurdity of our current redistricting process. Imagine, if you will, before a high school football or basketball game, the captains stride out to the middle of the field or the middle of the court to go over the ground rules with the officials. At the last minute, the visiting team learns that the home team has unilaterally made all the rules to their own advantage. Instead of going 100 yards for the visiting team, they have to go 120. Instead of shooting on a 10-foot hoop, the visiting team has to shoot on an 11-foot hoop. That would be unimaginable to us in the realm of sports competition. It would be un-American. Now, that can't happen in a sporting contest because we have independent officials that make and enforce the rules. People deserve and demand the same level of fairness in their political system. This is an idea whose time has come. Our sister counties around the state are doing it. Most notably, Nassau, Suffolk, and Ulster are already implementing redistricting processes that are independent and nonpartisan. Our community deserves the same basic fairness in this key part of the democratic process. We need to allow for more moderate, competitive districts and representatives who are more willing and able to be civil, collaborate across party lines, rather than just posture and pander to the wings of their party, because gerrymandering has eliminated accountability in general elections. And we need to restore integrity to government by overcoming political differences on a reform that has overwhelming public support across all party lines. This is a very unique chance to overcome the squabbles of partisanship that often plague this honorable body, to do something that will last long after us and improve our community. I encourage you to vote yes on this proposal for reform, yes for independent, nonpartisan redistricting, so we can advance it out of this committee, have a full hearing in our community, and a debate among the full legislature. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Legislator Esposito, for a very lengthy and succinct explanation of your referral.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Legislator Eckel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to speak a little bit to past commissions and the idea that there has been no gerrymandering in the past, how I find that almost laughable. One need only look to a couple of districts within our county to see this. Number one, if we want to talk about compactness and contiguous borders, let's look at Legislative District 29 that has a large swath, or as a matter of fact, the entire town of Irondequoit between its two parts. One part contains approximately 10 houses up on the lake, and then the rest of it is within the city. In between are two other districts that represent Irondequoit. A second district you need to take a look at, if you say there's no gerrymandering within this county, is my own district of 26th. My district, as people ask me as I go door to door, is who do you represent? Well, I represent 4 towns and a river. I represent a small piece of Maplewood in the city, which is about 60% of my district. I represent a small portion of northeast Greece, 1 ED in, northeast Gates, if you excuse me, 1 ED in Greece, and then we have to meander across the river and take 6 EDs out of Irondequoit, including one that is comprised mostly of a 200-foot wide strip up the east side of the river to the old Stutson Street Bridge that contains 3 people. When walking door to door, people wonder, how did that happen? And I say, that's the way the lines were drawn. This is how I do it, and I take it and I give it my best shot to represent an incredibly diverse group of constituents. And I think my past election results have shown how well I do. But the fact is, we continuously talk about contiguousness and compactness. And I find that within looking at that district, that there is neither of those. The other matter I want to bring to everybody's attention is that 1 week prior to the final vote on the lines of the district, a legislator about 2 weeks before had announced, or not a legislator, excuse me, a citizen about 2 weeks before had announced that he was going to run for election. A week prior to the vote on the district, the lines had changed suddenly within 1 block of his house, districting him out of the district he was going to run for. Surprisingly to all the other people, who watched this happen. He moved.